Every night when her husband fell asleep, Loretta Bell slipped out of his bed and rode into the arms of a man she should touch. It wasn't lust that started it, but silence, the kind that creeps into a marriage when love turns to duty and kisses dry up. Sheriff Asa Bell kept peace in Dillwater with a cold stare and iron grip. His wife wore her wedding ring like a suffocating shackle. Out past the pines, beyond where any good woman should ride alone, lived a man who remembered how to look at her. Colt Maddox. He was trouble carved from oak and shadow, a former gunman with a past soaked in blood and whiskey, and a mouth that could strip breath. No one knew Colt was alive except her. The first night she came to his cabin, she didn't knock, just stood there wet from the rain. Colt opened the door and the storm stepped in behind her. Neither spoke for a long while, but when his hands touched her, she didn't pull away. She leaned in and kissed him like it was the first breath taken in years. Out in the dark woods, she remembered who she used to be. Once a woman tastes freedom like that, she doesn't forget the flavor from then on. Midnight was hers to ride to the cabin where her heart beat. She'd wait till the sheriff's breathing turned heavy, slip out with boots in hand and ride through the trees like a ghost in lace. But hearts that beat in secret have a habit of stopping suddenly. And the night Asa Bell followed her, the truth came knocking. The cabin was timber, stone and smoke curling from a tired chimney. But to Loretta it was the only place that ever felt warm. Inside, the fire burned low, casting gold across Colt's bare chest and the scar he never talked about, running down his left side. She'd trail her fingers across it sometimes and ask where it came from. He'd half grin and say, "A long time ago, before I knew you." Loretta never pressed because the past didn't even matter out there. Not between those four cabin walls where time stopped and skin remembered. He undressed her slowly, not with urgency but reverence, like every button undone was an apology for years spent unloved. When she laid against him skin to skin, breath to breath, she thought of wild horses, open skies, and what it meant to belong to no one, to no one. Colt didn't ask for promises or speak of the future. He just held her like the night would never end and kissed her like it already had. But morning always came, and with it regret curled around her like smoke. She'd dress in silence, hair tangled from his fingers. She'd ride back through the trees, while the town stirred from sleep, none the wiser that the sheriff's wife smelled of wood smoke and sin. At the breakfast table, Asa would sip his coffee, his eyes always on the paper, never on her. Sometimes she wondered if he knew if he smelled the pine on her skin, if he saw the way her lips stayed swollen till noon. But Asa Bell wasn't the kind to ask questions he didn't want the answers to. He kept order, not intimacy. And Loretta had stopped asking to be seen a long time ago. But Colt, he saw her, he saw every part of her, the laugh she buried, the fear in her belly, the wildfire in her bones. And he gave her something Asa never did, a reason to stay alive. Still, she knew it couldn't last. Secrets this hot eventually catch fire. And the spark that lit the blaze came in the form of a letter tucked beneath Colt's whiskey bottle one evening. The paper was torn, the handwriting rough. It said just 5 words: "You're not as hidden as you think." Colt read the letter twice, once like it was a joke, second time like it was a warning. Then he folded it real slow like it might bite him, slid it back under the bottle, and didn't say a word. Loretta saw his jaw tighten, that vein in his neck rise up like it always did when he was deciding between fight or flight. But he didn't run. He turned toward her bare-chested firelight, catching the shadow of his collarbone, and said real quiet, "How long we think we got?" Loretta didn't answer. She just stepped forward and laid her head on his chest. She could hear his heart, steady, strong, like it was beating against time itself. Long enough, she whispered. They made love that night like it was the last time, slower, deeper, like every touch was a memory being carved into them both. She cried after softly, not from guilt, but because no one had ever held her while she cried before. Colt did without asking why, just pulled the blanket up over them and pressed his lips to her forehead like he knew something was coming and had protect her from it, even if it killed him. Back in town, the sheriff wasn't sleeping. Asa Bell sat alone on the front porch, boots planted, shotgun leaning against his knee. He wasn't a stupid man, had heard things, whispers in the saloon, side eyes from stable hands. He noticed the way her cheeks flushed before dawn, the way her eyes drifted toward the hills, when she thought no one was looking. And that morning, he followed the tracks himself. Didn't need a tracker, didn't need proof. He just needed confirmation. Confirmation that the woman had married out of pride had given her heart and body to a man who should have been 6 feet under. He rode slow, not out of mercy, but because he wanted time to plan what came next. Colt Maddox, he remembered that name, well back before he wore a badge. Asa had seen what Colt was capable of. They'd been on opposite ends of a gun once. Only reason Colt lived was 'cause Asa let him walk. And now that man was deep inside his wife, sleeping in a bed she snuck away to each night. Asa gripped the reins tighter. The wind howled through the trees. And when he saw the first wisp of smoke curling from that cabin chimney, he didn't hesitate. He rode straight up, dismounted quiet, and pressed his ear to the door. Inside he could hear laughter, her laughter. Low, breathless, the kind she never gave him. That was the moment something broke in him, not his pride, not his temper, his possession. And a man like Asa Bell, when he loses what he thinks he owns, he doesn't grieve. He punishes. The door creaked open, slow. Not kicked, not slammed, just opened, like a knife drawn quiet from its sheath. Colt was standing near the hearth, shirt half-buttoned, boots off holster hanging on the peg. And Loretta. She was still in nothing but one of his flannel shirt's legs, bare hair, wild skin, flushed. From the kind of night that made a woman forget the name she signed on a marriage certificate. She turned first, eyes met Asa's, and time split in two mine. There was no scream, no stuttered apology. Just a slow gasp, like the wind had left the room. Asa stepped inside, boots heavy on the old wooden floor, his coat still on his hand, resting on the butt of his revolver. Like it was just another morning patrol. Colt didn't move, didn't blink. He met Asa's stare like a man already halfway to death, but too proud to kneel for it. Then Asa spoke. "You picked him," he said to Loretta, voice like gravel soaked in kerosene. "Over your home, over your name, over me." She didn't flinch, didn't cry. She stepped in front of Colt, slow and sure, and said what Asa never thought he'd hear. "I never picked you, not really." That line split the room in two, cut deeper than any bullet could via. Asa's hand twitched. But Colt moved first. Not for his gun. For her. He stepped around her slow hands. "Raise no fight here, Sheriff," he said. "Lo, you want to drag me out. Go on, but don't point that weapon at her." Asa's eyes narrowed. He raised the pistol and said, "She made her bed, now you both get to lie in it." The shot never came, because Loretta, with one calm step forward, put herself between the two men and laid her palm on the barrel of Asa's gun. "You want to kill me, Asa?" she asked, voice steady. "Do it right now, because I ain't going back to a house where love is law and silence is punishment." Her words cracked something not just in him, but in the room. The air turned sharp, brittle, and for the first time in his life, Asa Bell hesitated. He lowered the gun, not out of mercy, but because he realized something far worse than betrayal had happened. Had lost control not just of his wife, of the story. And for a man like Asa, that was a fate worse than death. He backed out slow, said nothing, didn't look either of them in the eye. And when he mounted his horse, the look on his face wasn't rage. It was ruin. But the danger wasn't over. Because in Dillwater, a sheriff humiliated is a match tossed into dry brush. And Colt knew. Asa wasn't finished. Colt stood by the window long after Asa had ridden off, watching the tree line like it might spit out a posse any minute. Loretta sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled up, Colt's flannel still wrapped around her like armor. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from knowing what she'd just done could never be undone. "I should've told you he might follow," she whispered. Colt didn't turn, he just muttered. "I was hoping he wouldn't, but hoping's a fool's game, ain't it?" Outside, the wind shifted. The night had a different weight to it now, thicker, closer, like the whole world was holding its breath. By morning, it had started. First came the preacher, stopping by her home to check in while Asa was out on patrol. Then, it was two of the sheriff's deputies riding out to Colt's cabin. Not with warrants, but with eyes full of judgment and hands near their holsters. Loretta didn't go home. She stayed in the cabin with Colt cooking, mending, laughing again. They moved like lovers who had nothing left to hide, and everything left to lose. But Dillwater wasn't the kind of town that forgave a woman for wanting something that wasn't stamped and signed by a preacher. They whispered her name in church pews, turned their heads at the general store. One morning she found her horse's reins cut clean in the stable, and carved into the cabin door was just one word: Outlet. Colt stared at it long, then took his knife and carved something right beneath it. Mine. Loretta stood behind him silent, but her eyes shimmered. That night they made love like it was their last again. And maybe it was. Because Asa wasn't brooding anymore, he was planning. Had stopped showing up at the jail. Stopped answering to the mayor. Started drinking more. Started riding with men who'd kill for a badge and a sack of coin. He was building something. Not law. Revenge. And Colt knew it. Knew Asa would come back to that cabin. Not alone this time, and not for a conversation. So he started digging. Not a grave. A hideout. Behind the cabin, through a root cellar that hadn't been touched in years, he cleared space. Stocked supplies. Taught Loretta how to shoot his spare revolver. Shed held it like it was a rattlesnake at first. But Colt. He stood behind her, hands on hers. Breath on her neck. Whispering low in her ear. And by the time the sun set, Shed emptied 6 rounds into a tree trunk without blinking. This ain't how I pictured my second chance, he said with a half smile. Loretta leaned against his chest. You're still breathing, Colt. That's more than either of us thought we'd get. But neither of them slept that night. Because 2 hills over, Asa Bell was sharpening his knife and smiling into the fire like a man with a secret. It was just before dawn when the first shot shattered the stillness. Loretta jolted up hard, pounding blanket tangled around her legs. Colt was already on his feet, shirtless, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. Ridgeline, he said, moving toward the window. They're not waiting anymore. She ran to him, grabbing his arm. How many? He didn't answer, but she saw it in his face. This wasn't just Asa. This was a hunt, a message. Colt turned to her, voice calm but firm. You go to the cellar, now you stay down no matter what you hear. She didn't move. I'm not live on you, she whispered. Colt stepped closer, cupped her face. His hands were calloused, warm, but his eyes were something else entirely. Soft, final. Listen to me, Loretta, you saved my life. The day you knocked on that door, you gave me back something I thought I'd buried long before the law ever came knocking. She was crying now. Then don't make me bury you too. His thumb brushed her cheek. I don't plan on dying, but I ain't letting him take you back in chains. Outside hooves thundered. 6 riders. 2 up front. And 1 in the back. Asa. He rode like a king returning to his kingdom, or a man delivering his own justice. He raised his hand, and the men dismounted, spread out around the cabin like wolves circling meat. Then a voice rang out, loud, commanding. Colt Maddox. You got one chance to step outside and answer for your crimes, or well, come take her back piece by piece. Colt didn't flinch, just loaded another round into the rifle. Loretta gripped his arm. Please. There's gotta be another way. He looked at her, and something passed between them. Not fear, resignation. He kissed her hard, deep, like a man memorizing the taste of freedom. Then he whispered, If I fall, you run, you hear me? You run, and you don't look back. She nodded, but inside something shattered. He opened the door. Sunlight poured in, catching the smoke in the trees, turning the forest into a battlefield lit in gold. Colt stepped out unarmed. Asa rode forward, slow, dismounted, hat tilted low over those cold, bitter eyes. Well, Asa said, circling him, didn't expect you to walk out like a man. I ain't hiding, Sheriff, Colt replied. But if you're here for blood, best be ready to pay some yourself. Asa grinned. Oh, I ain't here for you, Maddox. He turned his eyes toward the doorway. I'm here for her, and from the shadows of the woods 2 riders broke off, headed for the back of the cabin. Loretta saw them through the rear window, and without a second thought, she grabbed the revolver, kicked open the cellar hatch, and stepped out with both hands shaking, but her aim steady as sin. Loretta had never fired on a man before. Shed practiced on fence posts, tree stumps, even old cans Colt lined up on logs like ghosts from the past. But this wasn't practice, this was real. The two deputies circling behind the cabin didn't expect the woman they'd whispered about in town. The one they called harlot behind their hands, to come out swinging with cold steel in her grip. The first one raised his weapon too slow. Loretta's shot rang out, shaky but true, and the man hit the dirt, groaning, leg bloodied. The second one ducked and yelled something she couldn't hear, then turned tail into the trees, disappearing like smoke. Back at the front of the cabin, Colt heard it spun fast, rifle raised. But Loretta stepped around the side, gun still aimed, barefoot in the dirt, eyes full of fire. Asa turned when he heard the second shot, saw her, and for the first time the sheriff looked stunned. Not angry, not betrayed, just hollow, like the last piece of his story had slipped clean from his grip. "You shot my man," he said, voice low and even. "I shot at what came for me." Loretta snapped back. "And I'll do it again, Asa, I swear it." His hand twitched at his holster. Colt stepped between them. "Don't," he warned, "don't you raise a hand to her again. You think this ends with a standoff?" Asa barked, "You think love is enough to outrun what you are?" Colt didn't move, didn't blink. "I ain't trying to outrun anything. I've outrun enough ghosts to know they always catch up." He lowered the rifle, let it hang by his side. "But I ain't letting her be one of them." Asa laughed. "Bitter broken? You think she's gonna stay with you when the smoke clears? You think that cabin's anything but a fever dream? She's a sheriff's wife, not some outlaw's whore." And that's when Loretta stepped forward, slow, steady, gun still raised, but her voice even stronger. "I'm no one's wife, not anymore." The silence after those words was long and wide as the desert. Asa stared at her, and for a moment he looked old, tired, like the past 20 years had suddenly fallen across his shoulders. He holstered his gun, but not out of surrender. "You'll both hang," he said quietly. "Maybe not today, but the law catches up." He mounted his horse slow, gave Colt one last look, then turned and rode back the way he came, the rest of his men following close behind. The air hung still when they were gone. Even the birds didn't return right away. Colt finally let out the breath had been holding, turned to Loretta. "You all right?" She nodded once, then fell into him, arms wrapped tight, head on his chest, breathing fast. "I was scared," she said. "I wasn't," he whispered back. "Not with you holding the gun." They stood like that for a long while. Then Colt took her hand. "We need to leave," he said, "tonight." Loretta looked up. "Where?" He smiled. "Anywhere that ain't here." They left that night, no goodbyes, no notes, just saddlebags, packed quiet boots laced tight, and two hearts beating faster than the hooves under Thummer. Dillwater shrank behind them, its crooked rooftops and judgmental eyes swallowed by trees and dust. Neither of them looked back. Colt led them east, toward the hills where old mining towns died, and no lawman bothered chasing ghosts. Loretta rode beside him, wind in her hair, no corset, no reins, just a pistol at her hip, and a man she'd nearly died for by her side. They didn't talk much that first day, didn't need to. The silence between them was warm now, not cold like it used to be in the sheriff's house. That night they made camp in a clearing by a slow creek. Colt built the fire, Loretta made coffee. They sat close, legs touching, and for the first time in days they smiled without fear behind it. "You ever think about what you wanted to be?" Colt asked her. She looked into the flames. "Free," she said. He nodded, same. After a long pause, she whispered, "Do you think it'll find us?" "Freedom." Colt didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, brushed the hair from her face, and kissed her soft, slow, like the world hadn't ended around them. Then he said, "No, I don't think it'll find us. I think we're gonna have to build it." That night, under stars thick as smoke, they made love beneath a blanket that smelled of pine and ash, and this time there was no shame, just skin and sighs, and a promise whispered into a collarbone. We'll never go back, but freedom's never free. And 2 days later, in the town of Calico Ridge, a wanted poster blew across their path. Colt's face, a $500 bounty, dead or alive. Loretta picked it up with trembling hands, looked him square in the eye. "You were supposed to be dead already." "I was," he said. "You lied. I survived." She folded the paper, tucked it into her coat, didn't yell, didn't cry. Just said, "Then I guess we keep writing." Because it wasn't just Asa chasing them anymore. It was the whole damn memory of everything they'd run from, and everyone who wanted to drag them back. But for now, with stars above his arm around her waist and the road still stretching, they still had each other, and sometimes that was enough. The town of Calico Ridge was too clean, too polite, too curious. Loretta felt it the moment they rode, and eyes followed her like perfume on the wind, not out of lust, out of knowing. There was something about a woman riding beside a man with that kind of silence between them, not married, not hiding it, just dangerous. They kept to the edge of town, tied their horses behind a shuttered stable, and ducked into a dry goods store for coffee bread and a can of peaches. But while Colt counted coins at the counter, Loretta spotted the poster again. Not blowing across the dirt this time, but nailed clean to the sheriff's board, new ink, fresh staple. And below it in smaller print was her name, not in full, just scrawled in black. Associate, possibly armed. She didn't breathe, didn't blink, just turned and walked back inside where Colt already knew. From the way she looked at him, they had to go. But it was too late. 3 men walked into the store right behind her, spurs sharp, guns low, eyes mean. "You Colt Maddox?" one of them asked. Colt didn't flinch, didn't even turn fully around. "Who's askin'?" "500 reasons," the man said, flipping the corner of the poster with a gloved finger. "Dead's easier, cleaner, no backtalk." Loretta's hand drifted toward her coat pocket. The pistol felt like a heartbeat. But Colt stepped forward. "Look," he said calmly, "you want to bring me in, fine, but don't point that thing near her." The lead man grinned. "Oh, I point at who I like." And that's when Loretta moved. Fast. Faster than they thought she could. The pistol came up. Her finger squeezed, and the shot took the man in the shoulder, sent him staggering into a shelf of molasses jars. The other 2 reached for their weapons, but Colt had already flipped the table, sent flour into the air, and dragged Loretta through the back door as bullets shattered the walls behind them. They ran through alleys, past fences, into a ravine behind the livery where their horses waited like ghosts. Colt helped her mount, blood on his arm, smoke in his eyes. "You all right?" She gasped. "No," he said, teeth gritted. "But I ain't dead, so we ride." They rode hard, didn't stop until the stars bled over the sky, and the wind howled across a dry wash near Devil's Tooth Canyon. There they made camp in silence. Loretta poured whiskey over the scrape on his arm, tied it tight with a piece of her dress. Colt watched her hands, still trembling. "I didn't think," she whispered. I pulled the trigger." "You saved my life," he said. "No," she breathed. "You saved mine back in that house in that town. Every damn night I stayed quiet." She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "I did kill for you, Colt. I didn't know that before today." He didn't say a word. He just leaned in, kissed her slow, and they held each other in the firelight like the world couldn't touch them there. But in the hills above, someone was watching. Asa Bell had followed the bounty trail, watched the shootout from the ridge, and now he finally knew what had come to accept. If he couldn't bring Loretta home, he'd make sure no one else ever held her again. The canyon air turned cold by morning. Not with weather, with the kind of stillness that made animals disappear like they knew something was about to die. Colt was already up when Loretta opened her eyes, standing by the edge of the bluff, rifle slung over his shoulder, watching the east like it owed him something. She wrapped herself in a blanket and stepped to his side. "You think they're still coming?" she asked. He didn't look away. "They're not coming, Loretta. They're here." She didn't flinch, because the truth was part of her had been waiting, not for Asa, but for the final page, the moment the past caught up and demanded blood in place of silence. Down below, a single rider appeared through the rising dust. Not a posse, not bounty hunters. Just Asa. He came alone, dismounted slow, looked up toward the fire they had built the night before, then raised his voice like it was Sunday morning and he still believed in God. "Loretta," he called out, "come down here and we'll end this the right way." Colt stepped forward, rifle already aimed, but Loretta put a hand on his arm. "No," she said. "This one's mine." She walked down the slope alone, boots crunching stone, hair loose, pistol at her side. Asa stood still as a statue, his coat dusted in trail dirt, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. "You look different," he said, voice low, "like you belong out here." She stopped 10 paces away. "I do." He took a step closer. "You're still my wife." She shook her head. "I was a prisoner, Asa. You just made it look pretty." His hand twitched. "I loved you," he said. "No," she whispered. "You owned me." Silence fell between them like ash. Then he drew his pistol, but not fast enough. Loretta's gun was already up. She fired. The shot rang through the canyon, sent birds screaming from the cliffs. Asa stumbled, not dead, but dropped to one knee. The bullet lodged clean through his shoulder. Colt appeared at the ridge, rifle raised, eyes burning. But Loretta didn't flinch. She stepped closer, stared Asa down as he bled into the dirt. "I don't hate you," she said. "I pity you." He looked up, eyes wide, mouth trembling. "You won't survive out here," he spat. "You that outlaw. I'll ain't had a future." She holstered her pistol, turned her back, and with one final breath said, "Then we'll die free." Colt was waiting when she climbed back up. He didn't speak, didn't ask what happened. He just pulled her close, held her, kissed the top of her head like she was made of glass and wildfire. And then they rode, not away, but forward, through the canyon, into the wild. And for the first time, with no one left chasing them, Loretta smiled. The town was called Granter's Hollow, a sleepy bend along a green river where the hills softened. Folks didn't ask questions too loud. They rode in at dusk, just as lanterns were being lit. The smell of cornbread drifted from open windows. Colt kept his hat low. Loretta sat tall in the saddle, her dress torn, skin sun-bronzed, eyes sharp as a blade. They didn't look like newlyweds. Didn't look like fugitives either. They looked like two people who declawed their way out of something, and survived. They took a room above the bakery, paid with coin Colt had kept sewn into his saddlebag. Enough for 2 nights, maybe 3. Loretta stood at the window that first evening, watching the slow life below, a boy pushing a hoop, an old man playing fiddle on a porch. No one looked up at her. It felt like a dream, and like all dreams, it made her uneasy. Colt came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "This it?" he asked, his voice soft against her ear. "The kind of quiet you wanted?" She leaned back into him. "I don't know," she whispered. "I think I'm afraid to want it." They didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, because of hope. They undressed each other slow, traced every scar like a road they'd traveled together. And when they moved together in the dark, it wasn't desperation anymore. It was belonging. She fell asleep curled against his chest, the rhythm of his breath like a lullaby. And for the first time in years, she didn't dream of escape, but of home. But peace is a tricky thing. The next morning, Colt came back from the blacksmith with his jaw tight. He tossed a crumpled newspaper onto the table. There it was. "Dillwater sheriff found bleeding on road outside Calico Ridge. Says outlaw still at large. Wife missing. Reward raised to 1,000. Loretta's throat went dry. "He didn't die," she said flat. Colt shook his head. "No, and now he's talking." She stood there, the paper trembling in her hands. It wasn't fear that hit her. It was the weight of it all. The truth was chasing them like a wolf again. And this time it had names, faces, towns. "He never stop," she whispered. "No," Colt said, "but maybe we do." She looked at him confused. He pulled out a small folded map, pointed to a thin dotted trail that led through the mountain pass west of Granter's Hollow. "No law rides that road, too dangerous, too steep. But there, a settlement beyond it, people who don't care about pasts. No churches, no jails, just earth and water and sky." She studied the trail. "You think we'll make it?" "I'm so." Colt smiled. "I think we already did." That night, they packed what little they had, left a few coins on the dresser, and walked out under a moon so full it lit the road like silver. The river whispered beside them. The wind carried nothing but pine and promise. They didn't speak much, just held hands and stepped into the unknown. Together. The trail west was steep, narrow, and cruel. Dust clung to their skin like a second coat. The sun blistered the back of their necks, and the nights dropped cold enough to make their teeth chatter through the firelight. But still, they pressed on, because behind them was a past with a badge, and ahead of them was a future with no name. One evening, 2 days into the pass, Colt stopped riding. He dismounted slow, one hand to his side, blood blooming through his shirt like a rose in the dust. Loretta rushed to him, panic ripping her voice. "What happened?" He gritted his teeth, dropped to one knee. "Bullet nicked me back in Calico Ridge," he said, breath shallow. "I didn't want to tell you then." She knelt with him, pressed her hands to the wound. "You fool," she said, tears hot. "You damn fool." He caught her face in his palm. "I didn't want to scare you. I've been scared since the moment I fell in love with you." They made camp in a hollow under a rocky outcrop shielded from wind. She cleaned the wound, wrapped it tight. He faded in and out of sleep, his breathing shallow. She held him through the night, whispered stories, sang half-remembered lullabies. And when morning came, his fever broke. He opened his eyes to the sunrise and her face. "You stayed," he rasped. She smiled, brushing back his hair. "I chose you." They moved slower after that, but they didn't stop. By the end of the week, the pass opened, and there it was, a stretch of valley tucked between ridges where smoke curled from chimneys and wheat swayed gold in the breeze. Children ran barefoot across the dirt. Men nodded without asking. Women smiled without judging, a place out of time. They found a plot near the creek, built their cabin from scratch, board by board, sweat and splinters and quiet laughter. And at night when the fire burned low, Colt would hold her, press kisses to the small of her back, and remind her that every midnight ride she ever made led here. One evening years later, a child ran up the hill from the creek, barefoot and wild-haired, holding a silver button in her hand. "Mama," she called. "What's this?" Loretta took it, turning it in her fingers. It was old, polished, heavy, from a sheriff's uniform. She looked out across the land, sun dipping low behind the hills, and Colt chopping wood with steady rhythm in the yard. Then she smiled. "Something I let go of a long time ago." And just like that, the past stayed buried. And Loretta, the sheriff's wife no more, finally let herself be free.